Schumer say, given Mr. Barr's public record of bias against the special counsel's inquiry, he is not a neutral observer and is not in a position to make objective determinations about the report.
And they go on from there. Mark Penn is a former advisor to both Bill and Hillary Clinton, has been through this before at a similar point, and were frustrated during the Clinton times. How do you feel now today, Mark? I know you were upset about this inquiry from day one. Do you think that in 4 pages we got the real gist of what was in the 675?
Yes, I think we do. I think from day one I've said, look, just read the dossier, and then you get the page-struck text and you said, look, there's something wrong here. This never added up. This was preposterous. We now spent 22 months examining this, and they find that there was, in fact, no underlying facts. Now, what happened in 1998, and I worked with President Clinton on impeachment, was when it was over, it was over. America didn't want to hear about it or talk about it again.
No follow-up probes.
The question really is, will America say the same thing, or will Democrats keep pushing this as though they need to do an investigation even bigger than the Mueller investigation, which is impossible given the resources that he had? Or will they say, you know, we had some legitimate concerns, our emails were hacked, now this investigation was held, we have to admit that the special counsel was right and move on.
Mark,
if they say that, I think they can get more votes. If they don't, they're going to be in for a possible backlash.
Well, they're not listening to you. Yesterday on the campaign trail, a few of them were out there saying they want to see the whole report. They're not buying it.
Well, I'm sure that they're going to read every single word of this report. I mean, it's kind of ludicrous. These findings couldn't be clearer. And I think the question out there, if you're on the campaign trail, is they don't want to disappoint their base that's been revved up about the Russia conspiracy now for 2 years. But the swing voters are quite different. They're going to look at this. They're going to look at the New York Times headline. They're going to look at the additional information that comes out and say, wow, this was never a real conspiracy at all. How did we ever waste 2 years of America on this?
And Mark, ultimately, third time's a charm for Donald Trump. This is the third investigation that has found no collusion. The House and Senate Intel committees both did the same thing. They said they couldn't find it either.
Well, and it's not like a microscope wasn't taken. It's not like all his friends, associates were not, in fact, taken to the breaking point to try to find collusion. Yeah. So obviously there was never anything there. And those who spread this have to be held accountable.
Mark, thank you so much. We have Kelly.
It was an illegal takedown that failed.
The president is stronger politically than he's ever been right now. There were people from the Clinton camp on this team. If they could have gotten the president, they would have, and they didn't.
I think this is a huge win for the president.
The door has been shut legally on collusion and obstruction of justice. End of story. He is exonerated.
This is a day of reckoning for our media like we haven't seen since the 2016 election.
I just want to tell you that America is the greatest place on earth.
This is a Fox News alert. Mueller findings released. No collusion, no obstruction. Let's bring in Rudy Giuliani, President Donald Trump's attorney, former mayor of New York City. He joins us live from our nation's capital. Rudy, good morning to you.
Good morning.
You said yesterday that the findings were better than you expected. What do you mean?
Well, look, you know, I think that it's quite clear that this group was hardly a group of Trump fans. It's made up of almost all Democrats, some of them very, very rabid partisans, including one who was a lawyer for the Clinton Foundation. Pretty extraordinary. Don't know how they accomplished that. Another one who's a notorious prosecutor who's been in ethical trouble all throughout his career. They conducted an investigation as if this were a terrorism case or an obstruction of justice case. I'm sorry, rather a organized crime case on their obstruction of justice and conspiracy theory. So they couldn't find it. If they can't find it, it's not there. Believe me, there was no obstruction of justice. There was no collusion. I just ask people to use your common sense. This investigation went on for 2 years. It cost actually about $40 million. 1.4 million documents. They got every document they wanted. They got every witness that they wanted. We stood in the way of nothing. Where's the obstruction? Where's the obstruction?
Some of the other channels,
Weissman theory?
Right. Some of the other channels are saying, well, we can't count this because the president didn't sit down for an interview. What's your reaction?
Well, I think I made 5,000 prosecutorial decisions in my career. Some of the worst criminals of the 1980s. I rarely got to interview anyone, the people that I indicted and the people I declined. That's very extraordinary when you do that. I mean, only because he was the president was there any pressure to do it. If he were just a regular citizen out there, Jay and I, or Jane and Marty, you think we'd have him even answer those questions? Of course not. He did that because he wanted to. And believe me, this is not something that usually happens. The real question now, though, is he's been absolved, vindicated, exonerated. You pick the word. Any lawyer never gets a letter like this. Usually you get a letter that says, we don't have enough evidence. In this case, we have complete vindication. And the reality is, the question now is, if there was no evidence of collusion, 3 investigations, no evidence of collusion, who made it up? This had to come from somewhere.
Right.
It just didn't come out of thin air. I want to know who did it, who paid for it, who fueled it, because the person who did it and the group that did it knows it's untrue because they invented it.
Yeah, the president yesterday said it's time to look to the other side now. Last night we were all reading this report. I know your entire team was as well. I want to read an excerpt from it. It says the special counsel's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The report identifies no actions that, in our judgment, constitute obstructive conduct. And then it goes on to say, I was impressed by this because many people are saying, why did this investigation take 2 years? This is a waste of our taxpayer dollars. It's going on and on. But when you read this report, it was so thorough. And I think it was important for Mueller and his team and Mr. Barr and Rosenstein to include how thorough it was. 675 days. The total cost, they report $25.2 million. You're saying maybe $40 million. 2,800 subpoenas, 500 witnesses, and the total indictments about collusion, 0. What do you say? What was your reaction about how thorough this was when you read that?
It was thorough, and it was conducted by people who had a bias to get him. People who didn't want him elected, people who were crying when Hillary Clinton lost, people who donated relatively large sums of money to her. We know how bitter that election is, and we know how angry some people are as a result of that. So it was conducted by people who had every motive to get him and tried every tactic, and some I don't approve of, to try to get him. Right. And to try to get people to lie. Listen to Mr. Corsi. Mr. Corsi yesterday was on, I think he was on Fox and Friends. It was quite a compelling statement of how they gave him a script. Hey, you want probation? Say this.
Right.
And man's got integrity. He didn't do it.
He did not. Over the last 2 years, though, we've all been waiting for the Mueller report, Rudy, and now we know. And Mr. Mueller was emphatic: no collusion, no evidence of collusion whatsoever. And that makes you wonder, when you look at, and we've got a montage here of Democrats who said there was evidence of collusion, what they do starting today. First the montage, then your reaction.
Sure. Love to see it.
I could certainly say with confidence that there is significant evidence of collusion.
Colluding with the leader of a hostile power.
We saw cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign, indeed the Trump family, eagerly intending to collude, possibly.
Collusion.
Collusion.
Collusion. If there was not collusion, there was at least the effort to collude.
There was collusion. If they just do their work and do their job, they will find out it was collusion.
So, Rudy, how many of those Democrats do you think are going to apologize today?
Well, I think they're shameless. I've seen them already. Ignore it. I mean, we did spend enormous amounts of money and an enormous amount of time, and we had very skilled people who had a bias against the president. The definitive thing they said is, as 2 prior investigations concluded, no collusion. You would think they'd have the decency to say, I was wrong, I made a mistake. Even if they want to move on now to this other stuff they're going to look at and just embarrass themselves, at least stop and say, I was wrong. They should also be happy for the country. Every American, whether they like the president or they don't, should today breathe a sigh of relief that the President of the United States and all the people around him did not engage in the horrible crimes that these people were saying. Imagine if they had, how terrible it would be for the country. These people are unhappy with this finding. But shame on them. Shame on them.
I did flip over to CNN last night, and Anderson Cooper actually said that a couple of times. This is good news for the country. So which is surprising. But you did call into CNN too. Here's a quote to show you how relentless the Democrats will be from Pelosi and Schumer yesterday afternoon. This raises as many questions as answers, meaning the 4-page report. Senator Durbin says the people deserve the full truth. Schiff and Nadler and Cummings says we call for the Attorney General to come forward and testify, which I'm sure he'll do. So when this rest of the report comes out, so it's 675 pages, when you take out the grand jury testimony and when you take out the top secret things that have to be redacted, let's say you have 100 pages there. In it, it's going to list things like the Trump Tower meeting. It's going to list things like how long the president was in conversations with to have a Moscow tower. And then my hunch is there'll be a reinvigoration of those saying, how could Mueller not come to the conclusion that the president conspired? What are you going to do with the backlash that'll happen in a week or two?
We have, Jay and I and Jane and Marty have about 90 pages of response that we can't use right now because we're not going to respond to no collusion, no obstruction. We agree. But if that happens, I'm very, very confident that our side will prevail again. So please, people just, here's the thing to understand, and I understood this from the very beginning, which is why I'm so passionate about it. He didn't do any of this. The man is an innocent man. Again, whether you like him or you don't like him, and I happen to, love him. I mean, he's one of my very good friends. And to see him go through this was horrible, just as a friend. To see him go through to the President of the United States really broke my heart as a patriot. The president shouldn't be distracted with made-up stories. Collusion is made up. If his collusion is made up, well, then how crazy is it? How could you have obstruction? Plus, please, guys, all of you, wake up. The investigation wasn't obstructed. Right. What did he think about it? Of course he didn't think about it. But you don't prosecute people for what they think. You prosecute them for what they do. If we prosecuted people for what they think, half the country would be in jail.
Well, this is justice. When you didn't do anything wrong, you're finally proven innocent.
This is a Weissman crazy theory. Just like campaign finance is a crazy theory. Those payments are, in part, personal payments, if not fully. Once there are personal payments for any reason at all, it's not a campaign contribution. Just think if people could settle the lawsuits against them with campaign money. Everybody would be running for office, collecting money, and settling the sexual harassment complaints against them, the breach of contracts complaints against them. 30 members of Congress have had our taxpayer dollars settle their sexual harassment. Did they list it as a campaign contribution? Of course they didn't.
Hey, Rudy, we have stacks of newspapers.
I want to know who they are.
We have stacks of newspapers in front of us, and the headlines are pretty shocking, especially for some of the liberal newspapers. New York Post wrote, no collusion, no obstruction. New York Times wrote, Mueller finds no Trump-Russia conspiracy. Wall Street Journal, Mueller finds no Trump collusion. New York Daily News, Teflon Don, and Washington Post, Mueller finds no conspiracy. But compare that to what they were saying. Look at a flashback of what the media was saying in the past.
The new chairman of the House Intelligence Committee is vowing to investigate a bombshell new report about the president.
To this bombshell report from BuzzFeed.
If the BuzzFeed bombshell is true,
this is evidence of willingness to commit collusion.
I think they're all going to end up together in prison.
He was colluding with the leader of a hostile power.
So much involvement, so many connections with the Kremlin.
Trump now sits at the threshold of impeachment.
We are in high crimes and misdemeanor, and we are in impeachment territory.
Right. We are looking at the possibility that the President of the United States and those around him during an election campaign colluded with a hostile foreign power to undermine the basis of our democracy.
It's so obvious that they were eager to collude with Russia. Now we're seeing the evidence that there was a conspiracy to cover up.
He may be the first president in quite some time to face the real prospect of jail time.
All right, your reaction?
Well, that's the group that's got to apologize. If they are decent people, they will now apologize. There's no high crime, there's no low crime, and there's no misdemeanor. And remember, this report was signed off on in the name of not just Attorney General Barr, but Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who's been into this case from the very beginning and appointed Mueller, and by the Office of Legal Counsel of the Justice Department, who are all highly skilled professional lawyers. And by the way, their interpretation of the law is the right one. The other one is let's call it a legal term, a cockamamie theory.
Well, Rudy, there was an investigation by the FBI. The FBI unleashed its powers on a candidate for president, which is an amazing first, on the grounds that the campaign had colluded with Russia. And of course, now we know that's not true.
And with a lead agent and his girlfriend, who hated the president of the United States, vowed to stop him and then to take him out of office. When do you get that?
Sure.
Never in a well-run, decent government seeking justice.
I think the Wall Street Journal writes this morning on their op-ed page, did someone con the FBI into one of the great dirty tricks in American political history?
Yes. And you're going to find out, believe me, who it was.
Give us a hint.
Nope. I can't give you a hint yet. We're still working on it. I got some theories, and there's a lot more than theories.
Is it somebody from the Obama administration?
Just pay attention.
This administration or the last administration?
Just pay attention.
Will that person be held accountable?
I believe so. I think we're in an era of a real Justice Department where just because you have a D after your name, Democrat, or Clinton or something like that, you still can be held to account.
Right, very interesting. So, Rudy, what was the president like last night when you spoke to him? And number two is, can you explain when you first knew that this might be breaking the direction you wanted it to?
Didn't know it until we saw it. I mean, I always hope for the best, but get ready for the worst. We were ready for some very, very difficult situation where they misinterpreted everything, and I emphasize again that this report comes from the Justice Department, not just Attorney General Barr, although it's about as well-written a legal document as I've ever seen.
In 4 pages. Now,
concise and powerful.
Do you give Robert Mueller credit, and do you feel bad about the discrediting of Robert Mueller from you and the president?
No, I don't at all. He deserved every bit of criticism he got. I mean, look, the fact that he couldn't find evidence is a testament to the fact that he's an honest man. He's not going to make it up. But boy, did he try, and boy, did he have some people that did things that, as a prosecutor for almost 20 years, shocked me. So they did things that, just because they came to the right conclusion, these are things you shouldn't be allowed to do. Manafort in solitary confinement? God almighty, I didn't put Fat Tony Salerno in solitary confinement, except once when he threatened a judge for a couple of days, and then he apologized.
Right.
We were all wondering if the president was going to speak before he got on the plane and when he got off the plane, and he did, and you could tell it. He was really excited and said America's a great country. So I was glad that he spoke out. Will he be speaking again?
Of course. Well, the president. Of course, he's going to speak again when he wants to and freely. That's, I think, the reason why so many of the American people support him. He's a breath of fresh air. He actually I was thinking last night, he communicates more than any American president I remember. I mean, all those basically scrums that he has getting on and off the airplane, those are press conferences.
That's right.
Okay.
Right. And they're very informative. Some of them take 20 minutes.
And sometimes they go on and on. You know what? The president...
And he loves them, and he's great at it.
And it drives his lawyers crazy.
Well, not now. Now we're a little relaxed. Well, no, he doesn't drive us crazy, but, we're supposed to take care of him and protect him. That's our job as a lawyer. So everything I did, I feel perfectly comfortable with. This investigation is much more of a shame than people know, and it was conducted in a more shameful way.
And what do you have to say to your critics?
Maybe they should apologize that first of all, it isn't our strategy. We had an innocent man we were defending. I know he's the president of the United States, but he didn't collude. He didn't obstruct. This investigation wouldn't have taken place if he obstructed. So both of them were bogus theories. It's a horrible thing when you have to represent somebody who's innocent. I mean, I could see in his eyes sometimes he would say to me, I didn't do anything with the Russians. I didn't do anything. How could they do this? He handled it better than anyone could possibly handle it. The only time he would really get upset, not about him, but about his family and about his co-workers and the people who came to Washington to change things and left having spent a lot of money, completely upset and dispirited. He feels very bad about that. And I think he can now he can't possibly be a better president in what he's accomplished. It's astounding, but I think now he can enjoy it more.
Well, I'm sure he's
take some satisfaction in it. I think you're going to see even more wonderful things now.
Sure, he's enjoying the fact no collusion, no obstruction. Rudy Giuliani, congratulations. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much for your fairness. I very much appreciate it in this terrible, terrible town.
Well, we said from the beginning, let's wait to see what happens with Mueller.
Don't worry.
We know.
We're ready.
All right. Rudy, thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
All right, Jillian is somewhere in the studio. I think she's upstairs.
I'm upstairs.
And has some news for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning. Following some other stories, starting with this Fox News alert. Right now, the Israeli military is reinforcing troops along the Gaza border. This following a rocket attack overnight. 7 people were hurt when a rocket from the Gaza Strip destroyed a home north of Tel Aviv. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now vowing retaliation and cutting his trip to the U.S. short. He will meet with the president today and fly home immediately after. This is a tragic story. A second survivor of the Parkland school shooting has taken their life. The Miami Herald reporting the male sophomore shot himself. His death coming just 1 week after another survivor, Sydney Aiello, killed herself after struggling with survivor's guilt. 17 people were killed at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland last year. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty for suspect Nicholas Cruz. Our thoughts to their families. Russia has apparently sent troops and equipment to Venezuela. 2 Russian military planes were spotted there yesterday, reportedly carrying a high-ranking defense official and nearly 100 troops. According to a Russian news agency, they were sent to fulfill military contracts. Russia has opposed U.S. sanctions on the government of disputed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. And look at this, a daredevil runs right through a dust devil at a tourist hotspot. The stunt caught on camera at an ancient Mayan pyramid in Mexico. No one was hurt and nothing was damaged. Dust devils appear similar to tornadoes but are usually harmless. Let's look at your headlines. Send it back downstairs to you guys.
All right, I've been to those pyramids. All right, thank you very much, Jillian. Meanwhile, after her anti-Semitic comments, the topic of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar took center stage at a major pro-Israel conference this weekend. We're going to show you what happened when one of the nation's top Democrats took the stage.
Yeah, Steny Hoyer stood up, and Alan Dershowitz calling Mueller's report a cop-out. He joins us now to expand on that.
You just fade away. Don't you know
Mexican woman and her niece, then turning them over to ICE. The drugs are worth about $240,000. And the elderly could soon be taking their senior citizens' discounts to pot shops. Recent studies show people 65 and older are the largest growing group of marijuana users in the nation. They're increasingly using recreational pot to pass time and deal with things like arthritis and sleeplessness. Also, they can't get suspended from school because most have graduated.
Meanwhile, special counsel Robert Mueller stating, quote, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him.
Our next guest condemning that move, accusing Mueller of engaging in a cop-out. Harvard Law School professor Alan Dershowitz is author of the case against impeaching Trump, and he joins us now to explain. Why do you think that?
Well, if he wanted to hedge his bets and he refused to come to a decision, he ought to go to work for a hedge fund. The job of a prosecutor is to evaluate the evidence on all sides and then come to a conclusion. This was especially important in the obstruction of justice part of the case because Rod Rosenstein should not be making any decisions relating to obstruction of justice because he was involved in the firing of Comey, and he has his own interests in making sure that the case came out one way rather than another way. So, I think 2 cheers for Mueller. He was right about obstruction of justice. He was right about collusion or conspiracy. And he was right in the end about obstruction, not bringing any charges. But he was wrong not to say unequivocally, look, we've looked at the evidence and there is no case for obstruction. There is no case for obstruction. You can't obstruct justice if you engage in your constitutionally authorized acts, firing, pardoning, helping the Justice Department make decisions. That should have been the end of the inquiry. Now, what we have is a Comey situation, like with Hillary Clinton. Comey said, on the one hand, I'm not going to indict Clinton. On the other hand, what she did was terrible. So the Democrats got something out of it. The Republicans got something out of it. Same thing is true here. The Republicans are saying vindication. The Democrats are saying this is an invitation to more investigations, and we have to now subpoena this guy and that guy. That's not what prosecutors are supposed to do. They're supposed supposed to decide up or down, indict or not indict, and then shut up. That's it. Move on.
Well, somebody who didn't shut up, the media. For the last couple of years, we've heard, Alan, on a couple of different channels. In fact, we've heard voices on this channel talking about there's evidence of collusion. Clearly, the president or his family or somebody involved with the campaign colluded. What do you make of what the American public took from what they saw on television, heard on the radio, read in the newspapers regarding that? And now this morning, we wake up, the media doesn't just have a little egg on their face. They have a whole omelet.
Well, with all due modesty, if they had just listened to me from day one, they would have gotten it straight. I called it exactly right. You know why I called it right? Because I'm not a politician. I'm not partisan. I look at the law not in terms of what I wish would happen, but what I know will happen based on 50 years of experience. I wish the folks over on CNN would have done the same thing. They didn't. All they did was, oh, he's going to be indicted because we want him to be indicted. He did collude because we want him to collude. He obstructed because we want him to have obstructed. That's not news analysis. That's advocacy journalism. And so I think a lot of apologies are due to the American public about being misled by many of the media who substituted wishful thinking for factual analysis. That's not what media people want to hear. What we want to hear as the American public is a straight down analysis. And what we don't want to hear from Mueller is a law review article. On the one hand, on the other hand, that's good for a law review article. But from a prosecutor, we want, no, we're not indicting, end of inquiry. That's it. But I think the end result is what the facts pointed toward.
Alan, a couple of things. Not only that, CNN, other channels too, and they question you. What happened to Alan Dershowitz? Why is he saying this? Why is he going off the handle like this? Man, he's lost his fastball. I know he voted for Hillary Clinton, but why is he in bed with Trump? What's your answer to those critics?
Well, they're still coming after me. The New Yorker has commissioned a hit piece on me attacking my personal life because they don't like what I've said about Donald Trump. You go all over the media, and I'm being attacked all over the place, not because of anything I did, but because of my truthful analysis, which people think shows I'm a big supporter of Trump. Look, I voted for Hillary Clinton, as I said. I'm a liberal Democrat, but I call them as I see them. I love the fact that Fox calls me the voice of reason. That's high praise for me. I try to apply my reason, my analysis, my 50 years of experience, and I try to give the viewer the truth, just what the facts are. But I get condemned for that because they don't want the facts to come out in favor of Trump.
It's ridiculous.
What they want is to distort the facts and the law to come out against Trump.
And it's ridiculous because you teach the law, and if there's not sufficient evidence of obstruction, there's no obstruction. Thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely.
All right, the Washington Capitals, you're welcome. The Washington Capitals getting their visit to the White House today, but some members of the team are skipping out. Shouldn't they just put those politics aside?
And another member of the president's legal team, Jay Sekulow, joins us to react to the Mueller findings. That's next.
There was no collusion with Russia, the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So it's complete.
Making a political determination on Capitol Hill.
So we have a lot of questions that are not answered in this letter.
In this summary from Barr tonight, the clear outlines of a new fight from Donald Trump's handpicked attorney general. The other key thing to know is that these 4 pages that Barr wrote, they don't have a single full sentence quoting the Mueller report at all.
Politically, the toothpaste is already out of the tube, as they say.
Yeah.
So, this isn't getting resolved in this country until November 2020.
All political. Let's bring in Jay Sekulow, Chief Counsel, American Center for Law and Justice, member of President Trump's legal team. He's smiling because he had a good day yesterday. Jay, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, team.
Okay, so not a zilch evidence of Russia collusion. The president has been telling us that for 2 years, and yesterday the Attorney General made it clear that that was the finding of Mr. Mueller.
That's correct. So the entire basis upon which this counterintelligence investigation began, which was allegations over Russian interference and collusion with the Trump campaign and people associated with the Trump campaign, Bob Mueller concluded after issuing, and I like to give these numbers, 2,800 subpoenas 500 search warrants, 230 orders for communications, 50 orders authorizing use of pen registers, 13 requests to foreign governments for evidence, and 500 witness interviews, that there was, as the president has said from the outset, no collusion.
That was smart of them to include that because it showed the American people how thorough this was and why it took 2 years. Yesterday, my family, we were watching, and we started with Fox, and then we wanted to flip around to see how the other stations
You were watching
covering
the game, too.
And the game. That was a little bit later, the Duke game. But we saw you on several different channels. You were on MS and NBC, you were on GMA, and you were saying that this took 2 years, time away from the things that are really important and really matter. How do the American people react to this? Because it was a lot of money, tax dollar money, and 2 years away from things that people went to the polls to vote on this president for.
Look, I think the American people are resilient, and I think what we have now is a concluded investigation. There was no obstruction. There was no collusion. The fact that I gave you the statistics about the scope and nature of this investigation, Congress has got these investigations going now on the same exact topics, except they don't have the resources or the capabilities or, frankly, the jurisdiction to get the kind of information that special counsel got. So instead of wasting money and time, and more importantly, I think, as important as time, let's focus on things for the American people. The president said he's in favor of comprehensive immigration reform. Let's get it. There's a lot of things that can be done to advance our country over the next several years. Let's start governing again. And I think that would be best for the American people.
William Barr said he's going to go through it. He's going to take out the grand jury testimony. He's going to redact the intelligence things. Are you in support, Jay, of releasing what he can? And what do you expect to happen after that? Because I imagine they'll have things about the Trump Tower meeting. They're going to have things about the would-be Moscow Tower. And it could reinvigorate all this debate again.
Look, my view is straightforward. I think the Attorney General, pursuant to the regulations, has the authority to issue what he thinks is the appropriate aspects of this report. He is doing that. And in that regard, and I think this is important to understand, he is not going to disclose 6E material. That if you did that, that could be a criminal act if you disclose grand jury material. National security material should not be disclosed. People that were exonerated should not be put in a spotlight. That would be wrong. That was what James Comey did. That was so wrong. So look, the Attorney General said he's in favor of as much transparency as he can under the law and regulations. He's going to do that, and I think it's going to move expeditiously.
Well, we had your co-counsel, Rudy Giuliani, with us about a half an hour ago. And when we asked him about whether he felt that this, whether somebody conned the FBI, this is from the Wall Street Journal, conned the FBI into one of the great dirty tricks in American political history, he said yes. And he felt that there was somebody who essentially invented this to destroy Donald Trump. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think, look, this whole thing starts with the Clifford, the dossier, the Steele dossier, right? And James Comey calls it salacious and unverified. Meanwhile, they started counterintelligence action on that. And then you got these FISA warrants. And the people that the FISA warrants against are brought up on no charges as far as it relates to Carter Page. And I think what this shows, after a 2-year extensive investigation, what the president said at the outset was correct. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. And we need to move on.
All right. Jay Sekulow, thanks so much. We'll be talking to you again.
Yep. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Congratulations, by the way.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great
Appreciate
moment
that
for
very
you and your
much.
team.
All right, 39 minutes after the top of the hour. Coming up, Mike Huckabee, Kellyanne Conway, Congressman Mark Meadows, Congressman Jim Jordan, and Dan Bongino.
And it's the no collusion conclusion. Now, Democrats are concerned.